Okay, we need to command of evidence. We need to find a quote that illustrates the student's conclusion. And we can see he concluded here at the end where usually it is. But let's read the whole text. Some residents in a neighborhood of Atlanta recently founded a community garden inside a local park. The residents agreed to volunteer to take care of the garden together. Students at a local high school surveyed some of the volunteers as part of a project to understand the impact of the new garden. The students concluded, here's their conclusion, that the new garden benefited the community overall by fostering connections and relationships between volunteers and other residents, even the residents who weren't volunteering at the garden. So I need some kind of quote that shows there was a connection between the volunteers for the garden and the neighborhood community. Our first challenge was deciding what plants would be most suitable to the climate and soil. We needed plants that could survive. No, that shows nothing about a relationship between volunteers and the community. B, we're lucky to have a few expert gardeners living in the neighborhood. Some volunteers and I have gone to them a few times with questions. Okay, this is showing a connection. And apparently these people were not volunteering in the neighborhood. So, okay. And they've been eager to help us and to learn more about the project. Okay, they weren't helping, but they're eager to help. That might just be confirming that they weren't volunteering. So this could look pretty good. Let's see what else we have. I love getting the opportunity to be outside and around nature, especially on days. No, that's nothing about the relationship to community and volunteers. D, my favorite thing about the garden is the feeling of pride I get when I walk by each day. As I see the plants growing, I feel good knowing that I had a small part. So that's how a volunteer feels. No, the correct answer here that answers the question is the quote that shows volunteers consulted with others in the community who are not volunteering. That's the correct answer. Okay, we've got a command of evidence with a table, so it's quantitative. We need to use data from the table to, in this case, complete the statement, to finish the underlined example in this case. Okay, so let's take a look. Guilds, local associations of artisans and merchants in the same industry, were widespread in France from the medieval period until the late 18th century. But guilds were much more numerous relative to the population in some cities than in others. So, okay, we need a table that shows the number of guilds, the inhabitants per guild, okay, the inhabitants overall. So they're much more numerous. The guilds were more numerous relative to the population. So that's inhabitants per guild. That's a column we need. In some cities versus others, they were different. Yes, in Rouen, that was very low. Very few inhabitants per guild. Whereas in Paris, there was a huge number of inhabitants per guild, or less guilds per inhabitant, if we want to say it that way. So yes, it definitely varied according to these points in the data. So let's see the answer choices. There were 49 guilds in Bordeaux, but 72 guilds in Lyon, despite the cities having nearly equal numbers. No, they don't have that nearly equal. Actually, Bordeaux and Lyon, not exactly that equal. Rouen and Bordeaux have very equal numbers. So I think that's not accurate toward the table. Lyon had far fewer inhabitants than Paris. That's true. That's accurate to the table. But had many more guilds. Did Lyon have more guilds than Paris? That's not true. That's inaccurate to the graph as well. C, there is one guild for every 661 inhabitants in Rouen. Okay, that is correct. Inhabitants per guild. Oh, no, that's guild for every inhabitant. Yeah, okay, inhabitant for every guild. That's the same thing. But one guild for every 4,511 inhabitants and parents. Okay, that's correct. And those were the very different numbers per guild, which supports our point. Some cities had a different population per guild. I think this is going to be our answer. C. Let's just check D. Paris had 133 guilds and 600,000 inhabitants, or one guild. No, this is just kind of doing the calculation of guild per inhabitant, etc. in Paris. That's not right. C is the correct answer for 34. Okay, we're looking at a command of evidence quantitative. I've got a table, and I'm going to have to complete the text with the right idea, or the right data, I should say, from the table. Let's make sure we get the right idea from the actual text. So what's going on here? I've got different depths of clams collected from the beach or collected from the seafloor, and we'll see what's going on. 2 kinds of clamshell tools used by Neanderthals were dug up in a cave on the western coast of Italy. Archaeologists such and such and her colleagues studied the tools and determined the Neanderthals either collected clams that had washed onto the beach or harvested clams from the sea floor and then sharpened the shells to make tools. Okay, so that's these 2 different columns right here. The highest number of tools made from clamshells that were collected from the beach, well, it's that, was found at a depth of 3 to 4 meters. We only care about that. We really don't even care about the seafloor column because that's not part of our text to complete. It's not part of the idea. So the answer is simply C, 3 to 4 meters below the surface. Let's just make sure that's exactly what it says. This is depth below the surface in meters. That is correct. Just want to make sure the units and the definition is the same. Okay, looks like we have another command of evidence quantitative with a table. And in this case, the question is asking us to support, so it's a support weekend, in this case, support the researcher's conclusion. Okay, so, all right, let's see what the researchers concluded. Looks like that's their conclusion statement there. Roughly what's going on here really quick before we even read. I've got the amount of time participants spent reading about 5 London museums. And I've got 5 museums on the left, their different ranking, and a percentage of time spent with participants provided with ranking or not provided ranking, apparently. Okay, so researchers recently conducted an experiment to understand how we use rankings to make decisions. They created a fictitious travel website describing the 5 museums in London. Then they invited 2 groups of participants who had never visited the museums to review the site and select the museum they would be most likely to visit. Meanwhile, the researchers tracked the amount of time each participant spent reading about each museum. For one group, the website ranked each museum, titling the page the top 5 museums in London. For the other group, the museums and their descriptions were not ranked. So they ranked one group and they didn't rank the other group. The researchers concluded that when reviewing ranked lists, we tend to focus on the top ranked option. So we take the advice of whoever is ranking it if we see a ranking. So let's take a look. Is there evidence for that from the table? The rankings go in order with the exception of this one that should probably belong right in here in the middle. And percentage of spent time reading about it, if they were provided with the ranking, was pretty high for the top ranked cases, right? The only outlier would have been the Natural History Museum. And if you're not provided the ranking, well, the amount of time you spent was pretty even across them, actually. They're all about 20% or 1/5. So I think that's the evidence. We want to see a lot for the top, more so than the not ranked situation. That's the right comparison. So participants who were not provided with a ranking of the museum spent roughly equal amount of times reading about each museum. That's true. That's accurate, but it's not answering the question. It just shows they were evenly split. It doesn't say anything about they were less than the top ranked museums from those who were ranked. B, participants who were providing with a ranking of the museum spent disproportionately more time reading about the British Museum. Okay, what was that? The British Museum was the #1 ranked. That does support their claim. This looks pretty good. But let's be careful here. We might need 2 things to make the comparison. Recall that when reviewing rankings, we tend to focus on the top ranked option. So that just says that sort of is a conditional situation that when reviewing ranked lists, so we don't actually need 2 things to make the comparison. We're assuming you're reviewing the ranked list, assuming you're in column 1 on the left there, which means this really could be the answer. Let's check C and D. Participants who were provided with the ranking of the museum spent the least amount of time reading about the Natural History Museum. Okay, yeah, that doesn't support our case. It's accurate, but it's not relevant. Participants who are not provided with a ranking of the museums spent the most time reading that. Okay, that might be accurate. I'm not sure, but it's definitely not even relevant. B is the right answer here. The people provided with the rankings spent a disproportionate amount of time reading about the top ranked museum. Okay, we've got a support weakened command of evidence here. We want to support the claim, and we can see the claim here in the last sentence. Let's read what's going on. Scientists have long believed that giraffes are mostly silent, communicate only visually with one another. But biologists such and such and their team analyzed hundreds of hours of recordings of giraffes in 3 European zoos and found that giraffes make a very low-pitched humming sound. The researchers claim, here's the claim that we want to support, the giraffes use these sounds to communicate when it's not possible for them to signal one another visually. Okay, so we need some evidence to show that they're actually communicating by this sound or voice. Giraffes have an excellent sense of vision. No, that does not stand any relevancy to our claim. B, the giraffes have only produced the humming sounds at night when they couldn't see one another. Okay, but we have no idea if that's producing communication though, right? So maybe they're just scared because it's night. We have no idea. So I don't think that's going to be correct. C, wild giraffes have never been recorded making humming sounds. Who cares? That's not relevant to the claim at hand. Researchers observed other animals in European zoos humming. Again, that says nothing. So I don't really like this B, but this is going to have to be the right answer. Because the researchers claim the giraffes use these sounds to communicate when it's not possible for them to see. So it is true they're not possible to see each other when it's at night, right? They only produce the humming at night. Okay, but it could be something else. It's not suggesting that they're actually communicating. But this is the best answer. So I think this is kind of, the logic's not great. It's not airtight for sure, but it's the best logic we have. So if we assume they're humming because they can't see each other, and that's at night, and that's their form of communication, then B is the correct answer. There's no other possibility here that could work.